Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to the Bold Moves podcast, episode number 51. I am the host, Mandy Bunchy, and I am really excited to share another fantastic interview for you today. Now, a few of my friends have told me that they feel like their life moves are kind of lame because there's people who watch TV and end up starting nonprofits in Africa. Do not feel bad about what you're doing, but don't let the inspiration sneak away. There's definitely still time to figure out what your big, bold moves are going to be. And doing those Fearless Fridays challenges are definitely ways to get yourself closer to whatever those are, whether that's figuring out what your bold moves are or getting your confidence and comfort level built up so that you can safely make that bold move. Now, for some people, getting breast cancer is a death sentence, not necessarily because of the illness, but because of their reaction to it. That is not the case for my guest today, Cassandra. She is a forensic scientist, which, yes, that is interesting and fascinating on its own. She's been on Forensic Files, and she got diagnosed with breast cancer before she was even 40 years old. And instead of letting that take her down, she decided that once she had passed her first cancerversary, it was time to start doing triathlons. But I don't even work out and decide I'm going to do triathlons, so I don't know how she does it. But it's amazing. Her story is inspiring. And please stay tuned to the end because we have a nice fitness-related giveaway for you that I think you will love. All right, without further ado, here is Mrs. Powered by Bling, Cassandra Burke. Hello, everyone. I am with Cassandra Burke. She is our latest Bold Move Maker guest. Welcome, Cassandra.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I'm excited to have you. So, of course, you know that the name of the podcast is Bold Moves. So you're here because you've made some bold moves. Do you want to kind of share your story a little bit with our guests, our listeners?
Sure, I would love to. I was actually diagnosed with breast cancer in October of 2010. Okay. I was 38 years old at the time, so not even, going for my annual mammograms weren't even part of my radar.
Sure.
It was kind of a fluke thing that I had mentioned something to my doctor, and so she was like, well, let's just be cautious and we'll send you for a diagnostic. And so she sent me for a diagnostic mammogram and they found 4 tumors in one of my breasts. Wow. My daughter was 4 years old at the time, getting ready to turn 5. Mm-hmm. And I'll try not to get choked up, but sometimes
it's okay. It wouldn't be the first time, wouldn't be the last. Yeah. A real reason to share your emotions. So
yeah, so the 30 days between that, hearing those words, you have cancer, and actually having the surgery and having the pathology come back, were a long time. We really didn't know what was going to happen. And so we got great news. It was early stage when they came back with the pathology. So it was, just about a year worth of treatment after that. Some pretty hard drugs, radiation, chemo, all of that, surgeries. And so nearing the end of that treatment at the end of 2011, I decided that I was going to celebrate my victory over cancer by competing in my first triathlon. And so that was kind of I kicked it in the butt,
Sure. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I trained for my triathlon, and then instead of doing one triathlon, my friend talked me into doing another one with her. And so I did my first 2 triathlons back to back, 2 weeks apart.
Oh my gosh.
And I've been doing triathlons and running races with my husband and my daughter ever since.
And your daughter is now?
My daughter is now 11. She was 4 when I was diagnosed. So yes, this coming October will be my 7-year cancerversary. I call it my cancerversary.
I like that. I need to tell my mom so that she's hip about it. Her anniversary is in June, and I don't think she knows that it's a cancerversary. So.
Yes, it is. You have to celebrate it. I mean, we're survivors. You have to celebrate it. Yeah,
absolutely. She celebrates. She just doesn't have the cute name for it yet. Wow. So one of the things that attracted me to you when you filled out the guest profile form was Powered by Bling. Can you tell me about that?
Sure. So in the triathlon and running community, bling is what we call the race medals that we earn. So I like to say that, that's kind of like the dangling carrot. It's what you're running towards. You want to cross that finish line so you can get another bling or metal to hang on your rack. My husband, like I said, my husband and my daughter and I all run races, both nationally and globally.
Wow.
So we each have our own bling rack, and they're all full of medals. And, you know, we like to continue to add more and more medals to that. Hopefully I'll add another 6 this year to that rack.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, so that's where bling comes from. So I say that I am powered by bling. I'm powered by getting another one of those race medals.
That makes complete sense to me. And this is going to be on a much less badass, sorry, grandma and grandpa scale. Every time I say something, I'm like, oh, that's not.
Yeah, they're going to be watching.
Right. But I'm wearing my 3-day shirt for you today.
Oh, awesome.
So, after my mom was diagnosed, one of my friends at the time said, hey, I heard this ad for a 3-day 60-mile breast cancer walk. Like, I'll do it with you if you want. And I'm like, well, she's willing to walk 60 miles. I can't say no. Like, she's doing it for me and my mom versus, you know, me doing it. So I'm like, well, I have to. And so then, much like, I guess you said your friend talked you into the second triathlon, a couple weeks later, I heard a commercial for a breast cancer cruise. And I was like, Carrie, you heard the wrong commercial. Easier, but with the 3-day, have you done the 3-day at all?
No, I have not done the 3-day, but it is something that I would like to eventually do. Yes.
Okay. Bucket list item.
Yeah.
So the thing that reminds me of your powered by bling is that every 1.5 miles or so, there's either a cheering station, a pit stop that has like some snacks, a couple porta potties or whatever. And I feel like it's the same thing. Like, there's people cheering and they give you stickers, and like, in regular life, stickers are relatively inconsequential, but when you're walking 60 miles, sometimes up a crazy hill, you're like, when is the next sticker? When is the next high five that I can get that like is keeping me alive? So I remember once in the San Diego, I've done it 6 or 7 times. So in the San Diego 3-day, I turned a corner and there was like, I feel like a wall. It was like a hill that was so steep that I was like, well, do we get climbing gear to make it up? And I was like, oh, this is so hard. And then there was a woman standing there with a sign saying, like, because of you, you saved my life. And I was like, okay, this is not as hard as having breast cancer. So that little dose of perspective was much needed.
Yes. So it's awesome though that they do that every 1.5 miles. I mean, most events don't have like, you know, that small of a distance between where you get that energy, you know?
Yeah.
So
and
that's awesome that they do it every 1.5 miles. Wow.
It's very, very well organized. And I won't say it's easy, but like a lot of those type of things make it a lot easier than it sounds, because you have that support. And even like, those are organized stops, but a lot of times you're going through neighborhoods and just people are
and they come out with their chairs.
Exactly. And like, here is a bottle of water or some. In Michigan, they hooked up like margarita stands and stuff that were unofficial, but
that caused you not to finish.
I guess if you stayed at a long time. Oh, I love it. So what do you do outside of triathlons, and how, I guess I've never done a triathlon, so how much training and stuff goes into that? Like, how much does that dominate your life?
Well, it really depends on the distance that you decide to do. So up to this point, I have done mostly sprint triathlons. So they're shorter distances. The swims are, you know, a little less than a mile, usually like about 1,100 meters or so. The bikes are around 14 miles, and then the runs are typically a 5K. So they're pretty short. They do require some training, but not an exorbitant amount of training. I'm going to do my first Olympic triathlon this summer on my own. So that will kind of double the distance that I've done so far. Okay. And my goal actually for 2018 is to do my first half Ironman. Okay. So that's what I'm training towards. So this year I did, splurge and hire a triathlon coach so he can really get me, building that mileage and getting more of the miles in. So I usually have some form of a training to do at least once a day. Sometimes I do 2 different workouts in a day. Okay. And of course, I always make sure I have like at least 1 rest day a week. Okay. So there is a lot of training, but my husband and I, we belong to a running club together. So we run together a couple of days a week with that club. And then my running partners run with me and they do my training when I have to run. So it's good. I have groups of people that kind of support me, and I have those accountability partners. So it makes it a lot easier than I have to go out on my own and do all this stuff,
Sure. Yeah. Accountability is huge.
So there's the social aspect.
I love that completely. Where in the world are you located? I know that you're on the East Coast, but where on the East Coast are you? Or Eastern time zone, I guess, not necessarily on the coast.
Yeah, I know. So I actually live in Maryland. I'm originally from Ohio, a western suburb of Cleveland called Avon Lake. But I moved out to Maryland when I went to graduate school in DC. And I live currently in Finksburg, Maryland, which is a northwestern suburb of Baltimore, pretty close to the Pennsylvania line, closer to the Pennsylvania line than Baltimore, but in that general region.
Oh, cool. I went to Baltimore in September and really liked it for the first time. Yeah. So it's a cool area.
Yeah.
What do you do outside of train for triathlons?
Well, in my real life, I'm actually a forensic scientist. So that's my real career.
Okay.
I've been a forensic scientist for 20 years. That's what I went to graduate school for down in DC.
Okay.
And beyond that, I am the swim team coordinator for my daughter's swim team. And, we're a very active sports-oriented family. So we do a lot of sports, outdoor sports, indoor sports. And, we like to go to movies and do all regular things. But
sure.
That takes up, between sports and work, that takes up a good bit of our time.
I believe it. And all the triathlons, those are not.
Yeah.
Very cool. So when you were diagnosed, how much did your daughter understand what was going on?
Well, my daughter actually was, I like to say, very fortunate in the way that this disease was introduced to her.
Uh-huh.
I know it seems weird to say, but she was 4. So, of course, when it first happened, we didn't tell her right away because we didn't really know what was going on ourselves. And she was at that age where she was used to, going on play dates and doing all those kinds of things. So, she was just going on a lot more play dates. Neighbors and friends were keeping her while we were going back and forth to doctors. And within a couple days, she knew that something wasn't right with our routine.
Yeah.
And she asked. And so when she asked what was going on, she actually thought something was wrong with her. So we knew we had to sit her down and tell her what was going on.
Sure.
So we approached it by telling her, her world was already pink. She was the little pink princess anyway, So, we sat her down and we kind of told her, that mommy was sick and that the doctors were going to be spending a lot of time with mommy and helping mommy get better, but that mommy was going to probably be sick for a really long time. And daddy was going to need her help helping to take care of mommy.
Mm-hmm.
And she immediately, took that little role of, the new little mommy and helped take care of me. And our local paper actually ran, that year, they ran a pink edition of the paper. They got a lot of sponsors. They actually colored the newspaper pink and they interviewed us and they interviewed her and they took pictures of us. And she got to be on the front cover of that edition of the newspaper. So, she had a lot of positive things happening to her around this.
Sure.
That kind of helped. We had, our community really supported us through this. The first 5 months I went through chemo, I never cooked a meal. I mean, we had people come over every couple days and bring food and they would come and clean the house for us. And so for her, it was just, she saw the positive side of people, even through the devastation of the disease.
Right.
We, of course, named our Komen team after her. So our Komen team is Pink Warriors for Mackenzie's mommy.
Aww.
And we've fundraised for that team for years. And, she's kind of always been the little star of that show,
Sure.
So she, I think she had the best experience of, from a small child's perspective of living through that disease that she could have. So I'm very happy that it didn't touch her in as negative of a way as it could have.
Absolutely. I can definitely echo the same type of thing. When my mom was diagnosed, some of my friends that I didn't even know her that close necessarily threw parties at nightclubs for me and got a bunch of stuff donated and raised thousands of dollars. Right. And it was just like, okay, this obviously is not ideal, but I definitely see the blessings of people rallying around. Like, is it Dr. Seuss or Mr. Rogers that says, look for the helpers? whenever something bad
Oh,
happens, like you
yeah.
ask for the helpers. And so that was something that definitely came positively from the whole situation, although obviously it'd be better
Yeah.
to not have to deal with it. But
Right, of course. But when it does, I mean, it really showed my husband and I like what kind of a community that we live in. You know, people that we didn't even know, you know,
sure.
kind of wrapped themselves around us and said, you know, we're here for you. Like, we'd never met you before. You know, we met you for the first time on our doorstep when you showed up with a meal. Like, you know, you've
Wow.
got to, you know, how can you help but see the awesomeness in people when that's what happens to you in the midst of devastation, you know?
Absolutely. So I want to go back to a little bit more with your discovery of it, because I think that this is important for people who are listening to potentially, you know, save lives. Did you do self-exams? Did you just randomly, how did you discover it? What led you to asking your doctor, like, hey, I think something's up?
So I really didn't even ask my doctor. I had the month before, probably around the middle of the month, I had felt some odd, like just sharp shooting pains in the one side of my breast. And I didn't really think too much of it. It happened just periodically. It would be like a short burst and then it would go away. And it happened a couple of times and then it stopped. And then a couple of weeks later, it happened again. And I was like, oh, you know, must have something to do with my cycle. Like, you know, and I kind of had really just dismissed it. It wasn't even, I was like, oh, it was related to my cycle, whatever.
Sure.
But then the following month in September, I went for my annual exam.
Mm-hmm.
And during the course of my regular exam, she was doing my breast exam. And she was like, you know, have you noticed any issues? Have you felt anything? And I was like, no. I said, but, you know, last month I felt these really odd twinges of pain periodically. And they were a couple weeks apart. And so I kind of feel like they were maybe related to ovulation and my cycle, but you know, I don't really know. And she said, well, breast pain's not a sign of breast cancer, but because it's abnormal for you, we really should have it looked at.
Mm-hmm.
And I completely and utterly credit her with having the foresight, especially in the medical community that we live in, that doesn't want to do a lot of testing right away, right?
Right.
I really do credit her with being a proactive doctor and being the person that, next to God, saved my life.
Wow.
Because had she not sent me for that diagnostic mammogram, you know, a breast exam would not have been on my radar for another couple years. Like I said, I was like 38. And each of those tumors was 1.25 centimeters a piece.
Yeah.
And they were graded the most rapidly growing form of cell.
Wow.
So by the time I would have most likely even gone for my first mammogram at the age of 40 or maybe even 41, because who just picks up the phone on their 40th birthday and says, hey, can I make my appointment for my mammogram? You know, so by the time that they would have been discovered, it potentially they could have been to the size that it could have been too late.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm so grateful that your doctor was on top of her game, because you're right. Yeah. A lot of times you do have to really be an advocate for yourself and force the tests. And, you know, so anyone listening, if something's up, make sure you
mention it,
stand up for yourself. Don't be afraid to potentially save your own life by that. I'm so glad that happened. So now do you do self-exams?
Yep. And I actually, when that happened to me, my girlfriends that were in their mid to late 40s, they all were like, you know, a lot of them just called up their doctors and made an appointment and went and got checked, even though they were, you know, too young to be thinking about it. And one of my friends and neighbors, actually, they found something in her when they did hers. Yeah. And fortunately, it turned out to be something that was benign, but, you know, she had a family history of breast cancer. And so me being diagnosed scared her enough that she went early and had it done. And you know, it made friends of mine close to me say, you know what, I'm not going to ever not do this. It's going to be something I have to commit to doing, because you just never know. You just never know what's there. I would have never been able to feel what I had. They were 1.25 centimeter tumors. They were centralized in the breast tissue, and there would have been no way even my doctor would have felt them. And in fact, my breast cancer surgeon told my husband Joe and I at one point in one of our appointments that she and the radiologist actually disagreed with what the radiology scan was showing. And he, as a radiologist, he was adamant that they were tumors.
Uh-huh.
So,
Wow.
you really, there was really every step along the way for me. It was, somebody was, the man upstairs was in my corner, like
Absolutely.
making sure that was found.
So I'm so glad that happened. And I'm so glad that, it's inspired the people around you. It's so funny because people talk about, the whole pink washing thing, and there's enough awareness because we all know what breast cancer is. And,
right.
But, not until it comes close to your home do you realize that, hey, you should be proactive in checking
Absolutely.
yourselves. And one thing that I want to say too is my mom was 47 when she was diagnosed, and she was getting her regular mammogram, and she didn't have lumps. She had something called microcalcifications.
Oh, yes, that's what mine was.
Okay. Hers were the size of grains of sand.
Wow.
So there was no way anyone was ever going to feel those. But since she was proactive and got her regular mammograms, that, saved her life as well. So it's so important to not just be like, oh, it's October, everyone's wearing pink.
Right.
But like whenever you see something like that, be like, okay, I need to feel myself up and make sure.
Yeah.
If you're 40, go get your mammograms. And I think they're trying to push the age up is what I've heard. And it's like, no, like if anything, make it lower. I've already had one when I was 30, I went and they said I could probably go every 2 years or 3 years between now and then because of my mom, but she got tested and we don't have the gene. Did you get tested for the?
Yes, I did get tested and I don't have the gene. I actually have no family history of breast cancer. So I am the first person in my family to have breast cancer. But you're right. They recommend now that the offspring of survivors begin getting tested 10 years prior to the diagnosis age of the mother.
Yeah.
So my daughter will, start in her late 20s, starting to get mammograms.
Yeah.
But to your point about them changing the age of, when the insurance companies think people should get mammograms. I was recently at one of the annual breast cancer luncheons at the hospital. And the speaker was a radiologist, and she was really talking a lot about the difference in what the technology has allowed them to find because of 3D mammography versus 2D mammography. And she did a whole presentation on it, and it was amazing to watch what they can see in that 3-dimensional mammography,
right?
Versus that, just that, 2-dimensional photo. And you could actually see her rolling through the 3D image, and you could see the tumor coming into focus and going out of focus, and coming into focus and going out of focus. And in the 2-dimensional print, you couldn't see the tumor at all. And so how many more lives that technology is saving just because they have that additional ability. Yet at the same time, the insurance companies are looking at what are the ages of all of us survivors and those who have passed away. What are the ages of onset for breast cancer? And what they're seeing from a mathematical standpoint is a spike at a certain age where it just, the graph just goes up super steep. And it's that age that dictates to them when they will begin covering those. And unfortunately, that age is getting into the 40s.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because there's so many people in their 20s and 30s being diagnosed, yet they have to fight for the insurance company to give them the right to get that test.
Well, on 2 notes of what you said, like, first of all, if your insurance doesn't cover it, that's why we walk, right? Or you do your
absolutely.
The fundraising, like if you can't afford it, please, like I walk for you to go and get a free mammogram from wherever. If you Google it, there's definitely a lot of resources, and that is the whole point. And then the same thing was with the technology of the 3D mammography. I think that's what I got when I got it a few years ago. And I was terrified to go in, and it's not that bad. It didn't hurt. It, like I had heard horror stories and was imagining like a steel vise smashing your tube. Like, this is gonna be the worst thing ever. And I got done and I'm like, oh, that was all. Like everyone should go do that because it can save your life. So
exactly. That's that little bit of discomfort, right?
It wasn't even that uncomfortable. And I thought, like, I have dense breast tissue, according to my gynecologist.
Which is why 3D is for you. Yes.
Right, exactly. And so I'm like, well, this is going to extra hurt because like, but I was like, oh, not a big deal at all. So kudos to all the fundraising efforts that led to the advances in technology and the ability for anyone, regardless of insurance company or coverage, to get that life-saving potential.
Absolutely
done. So there's another positive, I guess, to it.
That's right.
Thank you, obviously, for the fundraising that you've done, and
your family as well. Everybody, every little bit, no matter how small. Some people think, I'm going to get a group of 6 friends together and we're going to go do this race or that race, but we're not going to be able to raise that much money. The $20 or $30 registration and a $5 extra donation, like that pays for so much, for medicine for somebody, for, a ride to the hospital for someone that doesn't have a support system. Like every little bit counts towards someone who doesn't have the resources to help themselves.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I'm so glad that we had this opportunity to share the message, for sure.
Yeah.
So one thing that I love about your story is that you had a potentially life-threatening illness, disease, and instead of playing like the sick person victim role, you're like, okay, I have this body, it still works, and I'm going to push it to the limit. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you go from like chemo and radiation, which is devastating and terrible for your body, necessary right now, I guess, but how do you go from there to the opposite extreme?
So I've always been a type A overachiever, if you can't tell that through my own personality. And I've always been a person who is generally happy, glass half full. Who wants to live? Why not live your life glass half full? There's so much out there to do and explore and learn, and there's so many opportunities for everybody that glass half full. Get up in the morning. What are you going to do? What can you achieve? Right.
Sure.
So my personal life philosophy is challenge yourself to cross your own personal finish lines. Everybody, no matter who you are, we all have a struggle of some kind. It doesn't have to be a medical struggle. It could be an emotional struggle. It could be a personal struggle, whatever it is. We all have to struggle. But internally, we have to be able to pick ourselves up and love ourselves enough and encourage ourselves enough to go out there and make the life that we want. And so, it's the reason that I started my blog in the first place, was that I wanted to take my energy and show people that, you can, that time for me during chemo, even as jovial and happy as a person as I normally am, that sunk me really deep into, a dark place, because it was hard. It was hard to experience what those drugs do to you. And, but I couldn't live in that. I had a daughter that deserved to have a mother who was present in her life. And I didn't want her, I didn't want her to know me like that. I didn't want her to see me like that. Even when I was sick, I wanted her to see the smile on my face. I wanted her to not see, how bad I was hurting, or, I didn't want her to remember that,
Sure.
And that was really where the most of my motivation came from. But, I've always been a happy person. So it wasn't a far leap for me to say, what am I going to do? What am I going to do to get myself out of this funk?
Right.
And so I started the blog, and mainly because I wanted to encourage people to, show people that it doesn't matter what you face. Like, you have it within yourself to set a goal and to achieve a goal. And that's what I still blog about. I still blog about, setting actionable goals and, picking a goal, picking something that you think you can't achieve, and then breaking it down and saying, what am I going to do today or next month or a year from now to try to get closer to what I really want out of life. And that's really the message of what I wanted to share with people, is challenge yourself to cross that finish line.
I love that.
Yeah.
For all of my episodes in the show notes, I put little tweetable things. Like if
Yeah.
there's a quote from my guest that I think is fantastic, that would just make a good tweet on its own. I feel
Yeah.
like you just did 10.
Yeah.
Like, okay, this is the part of the interview where I'm going to get all of those for the show.
Yeah. Well, the hashtag is cross your finish lines.
Okay, so there we go. Cross your finish lines. I love that.
Yeah.
So this is probably exactly what you just said, or maybe it isn't, or maybe you don't know, but what would you say your purpose is?
Yeah, that's a good question, because, you know, a lot of times when people get hit with something devastating in their life, they ask why. And that's one thing that I've always said is I've never asked why. Why did this happen to me? It happened to me for a reason. I know that it happened to me for a reason. My husband and I know that it happened for a reason. Mm-hmm. At that particular time in my life was very centered on my career and, you know, being accomplished in that career and being a somebody in that career. And I was, you know, for all intents and purposes, maybe having my priorities a little bit in the wrong place.
Okay.
And so I feel like that, you know, that it was a gift. I actually look at it as a gift. It was a gift that gave me that time out to say, you're not on the path you're supposed to be on. You know, this was not your purpose. I didn't put you on this earth for this to be your purpose. And I can honestly say that I still am not sure what my purpose is. I know that I have changed my life direction and I'm working towards what I feel like my purpose is. But sometimes I still say, I don't know. Am I going in the right direction? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Is this the path I'm supposed to be on? I feel like my path is supposed to be to inspire people and encourage people and help people become better versions of themselves. Mm-hmm. But I don't really know if that's my purpose. I'm still trying to decide if that's my purpose.
Well, I think even the fact that you're questioning it and thinking about your purpose is a step above where a lot of people are. And, you know, perhaps it is because of cancer being a wake-up call, but I definitely appreciate the work you're doing in the world. And
thank you.
You know, you're certainly on a better track, it sounds like, than you were.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
A little bit of questions on your jobs, because obviously when you said you're a forensic scientist, I said, ooh, because to me, I'm like imagining CSI. Is that pretty legitimately close to what I had a feeling that was going to be your answer, but do you want to just tell me a little bit about that?
So CSI, you know, a lot of people watch CSI and they think that that's what forensics is, but really, you know, CSI, they only have an hour to do the show, right? So the main character has to be, you know, the detective and the forensic scientist, and they have to do all these things in the lab, and they got to interview the suspect.
They're filling 25 roles.
And in reality, you know, it takes a village to do that. You know, there's like 12 different people that do all those tasks across one investigation.
Okay.
So in that regard, it's not that realistic. But, you know, forensics it's very science driven. So, you know, it's very tedious. At times it can be monotonous, but it's always very interesting because you never know what you're going to get for evidence. You never know what you're going to be looking at or analyzing. Mm-hmm. So I would say that some of the truer, the truer shows that are out there, like Forensic Files, which I've actually been on.
Cool.
If you watch those shows, you'll actually see like this is really what a forensic scientist does. So we're really just doing the science part, the stuff you see them doing when they're in the laboratory, working with the instruments and stuff like that. That's what we do. We don't do the rest of all that.
Okay, got it. So do you have any cool cases or anything that you think would be interesting to share?
Well, if people want to go to YouTube, they can actually watch my episode. It's probably the best case I've ever worked in the 20 years I've been doing forensics. Okay. And they can find it on YouTube. It's from Forensic Files, and it's called Dollars and Cents, SENSE.
Okay.
And so, I'm a lot of cases I can't talk about, you know, obviously, because they have court proceedings and things like that. So I'd rather them go watch that episode because I know it's been approved to be talked about than to actually share a real case online.
That's fair. And I will put that in the show notes too, so that they can easily find it if they need to.
Great.
So maybe it's job related. Probably not. It's probably cancer related. But what would you say the scariest thing you've ever done is?
The scariest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
I would say it's battle. It is battle, breast cancer.
Yeah.
you know, especially in, once I got the pathology back and we kind of knew what it was and that it was treatable and that it was going to be a hard road, it changed. But in those 30 days, I've never been more scared in my life.
Now this question again is going back to my personal experience with my mom, but how did they tell you?
Unfortunately, over the phone.
They did that with my mom too. And that's so crazy. She actually complained enough that they made it a policy at their hospital to make an appointment regardless.
That's awesome. Unfortunately, the way it happened to me was I had the stereotactic biopsy on a Tuesday morning, and I hadn't heard anything. So I was, I went about my life. And a couple of days later, I was like, oh, must not have been anything because nobody's even bothered to call me.
Sure.
And then I'm sitting at my desk at work a couple of days later, and the phone rang. And it was actually a radiology tech. It wasn't even a doctor. And she called and she was like, I'm calling with the results of your biopsy. And I was like, oh, okay. And she was like, it was positive. You have cancer. Just as nonchalant as that.
Oh, and how many times did she do that day?
What? I said, what? I'm sorry. And she said it again. And meantime, while she's saying it, I'm screaming and everybody's running in my office because everybody knew I had the biopsy done. And my husband's beeping in on my phone because they had tried calling the house first, and I can't answer him. And I'm asking all these questions, and she's like, I don't know. You'll have to ask your doctor. I don't know. You'll have to ask your doctor.
That's the worst thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, that's how I found out. And I, like you, I'm like, how can this be the policy of how you tell somebody this?
Yeah.
That should not even be in their operating procedures of how you deliver that kind of a news to somebody.
Okay, so we need to complain to your hospital or your doctor and make that change because it's not that hard. You can just make it, okay, every time you get a biopsy, you come in 3 days again, and then, hopefully you bring your family and they're like, you're good, and then you can all go to lunch and celebrate. Or if it is the answer that you and my mom both got, you at least have somebody there and can kind of plan for it.
Absolutely. And going back to the question that you had about purpose, I think that one little piece of my purpose was that almost a year to the day later, my office assistant was diagnosed with breast cancer. And she lived here. She's not from here. She had no family here.
Yeah.
She had no support system in the area. And so, I took her to all my doctors. I sat at all the appointments. I sat in the chairs that Joe sat in when I was the patient, and I was her advocate, and I walked her through that process, and I was her support system for her. And so part of me thinks that part of my purpose was that my strength could get me through, and it could help someone else get through. And I think that is a little piece of that puzzle.
Absolutely. I'm certain that that's at least part of it. Yeah, we need to call your doctors and make that change because my mom was fortunate that she was at home with my stepdad. And so I guess if you're going to be hearing it on the phone, being with your husband and at home is ideal. But he was like, what if I was a mom dropping my kids off at school? Or, what if
you answer your Bluetooth and they tell you that? Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're like, oh, mommy's okay. Oh, that needs to be changed nationwide like that. There ought to be a law. I
absolutely agree.
That's insanity. So when you're scared and in these circumstances, and I know you mentioned Mackenzie helped you, but when you're scared, what do you do to push through fear? You're like, I just had to. You just have to. Honestly, in that situation, it was her. Mm-hmm. It was my child. As a mother, it's just, I had to live for her because the last thing I wanted was for her not to grow up with a mother. And, for her 5th birthday, which was a month later, to be the last birthday she ever got to celebrate with me. So. Okay, now I'm going to cry.
She was my driving force to stay strong.
I'm sure that there are a lot of breast cancer survivor moms that can identify with that. And Mackenzie's a lucky girl to have you too. So I'm so glad that you're all powering through and getting more bling.
That's right.
If you had to think of other life situations, like maybe signing up for your first triathlon or other situations where you had to push past fear, if you had advice to give our listeners who, you know, don't have the driving forces of a daughter or, you know, are just trying to make bold moves and need a little extra push, what would you give advice in that way?
Well, I think, you know, each of us every day probably encounters things that, you know, cause us that, you know, butterflies in our stomach, that tension, you know, that, you know, we all have that fear wall right in front of us that we have to just, you know, take a deep breath. And I think a lot of it is, you know, some of it's internal, but a lot of it is also, you know, having a little faith that if you've gotten to the point where you're ready to take the next step, then you'll succeed. And if, you know, you still have a little bit of more work to do, it's okay to fail. That was a lesson that took me a long time to learn, that it's okay to fail and stand back up and keep trying. And eventually you'll push past that fear, and the success that you'll find on the other side will be worth everything that you know, had to do to get there. Yeah.
I love that. That's fantastic advice. Do you have any other general life advice you'd like to impart on our listeners or viewers who are watching?
Yes, I would just like to say, challenge yourself to cross your own personal finish lines. Everybody has it in them and everybody can do it. You just have to dedicate yourself to whatever your goals are, and they are achievable. They will be achievable. It may take you a year, 2 years, 5 years to get there. But if you set the goal and you always keep pushing towards it and challenging yourself to push past those little pieces of fear that come in your way, one day you will cross that finish line.
So you've crossed how many finish lines so far in triathlon?
Well, between 5Ks and 10Ks and half marathons and triathlons, I think I have about, I don't know, 15 or so medals up there. So
okay, that's a decent amount of bling.
Yeah, in the last couple of years and couple years,
yeah, for sure.
So, and hopefully another 6 by the end of this year.
I love that. You're gonna, you know, increase it by 50% there.
That's right. That's right.
Beautiful. If I know you mentioned, and it's so interesting because I had another guest. He was actually my second guest, I believe, and he is a quadriplegic. He was at a wrestling accident, and you know, he also said the same thing as you, where he was like, I think it's a gift. And that's such an unusual thing to say. And with that in mind, especially, he's still impacted. He can walk, but he's still like regaining a lot of function. And it's so fascinating to watch him on Instagram, like his weightlifting and stuff. He has a six pack and it's crazy.
better than me.
Me too. And I have no excuses.
Right, exactly.
It's so funny because my friends that listen to my podcast are like, man, listening to your show makes me feel like helping an old lady across the street. Not that not that big of a helpful thing, or like I feel like my projects are lame, and I'm like, that's the point. It's to inspire. I'm like, I feel the same way, but but one of my favorite questions to ask, I guess what I'm getting to is, on a scale of 1 to 11, if little Cassandra at like 8 years old could see you now, how excited would she be for what's to come?
I think she'd be a 15.
A 15, I like that.
15. I think that, I like I said, I think that these last few years have really put me on the path of where I'm supposed to be. And I see, you know, I see big things happening, and I see big things that I'm working towards, and I'm very excited about that. And when I look back at, you know, 8-year-old Cassandra, I just have to actually look to my left or to my right, and I see my little mini me, and she's my little mini me. She's the same person. I see myself in her every day, and I see that same, you know, that same drive in her that I've always had. And it makes me excited, not only for myself and my own goals, but to see what she's going to accomplish in her life.
That's awesome. And we're so glad that you're able to see that, like you said, because you survived and That's amazing. So many more birthdays for you and Mackenzie.
That's right. Absolutely.
I love that. So you said, that big things are happening for you, and I definitely agree with that. And you mentioned that you have a blog. Where can we find you if we want to see what you're going to accomplish and keep track of your 6 races and all that?
Yeah.
Where are you online for people who want to hang out with you social media?
So my blog is poweredbybling.com, and I'm on most social medias: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and my handle is Powered by Bling there as well. So I'm very easy to find, only one word to have to remember. And so, yeah, I'd love if people would follow along and, read my articles. I not only blog about, my races and training in triathlon and running, but I also, from time to time, I have personal development posts and, the setting goals that we were talking about. I have, a free download and how to set actionable goals, how to break those goals apart and set those smaller goals so that you can be successful in achieving a bigger goal that you're not sure, that you're afraid of, that you're afraid to tackle. Break it down, make some small steps, and make those bold moves, because those little bold moves will get you to the big bold move.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And I think we have very similar missions, different trajectories, but very similar missions in life. So it's great to talk to someone that, we're on the same page. You mentioned the personal development, and I guess your answer doesn't have to be personal development related, but do you have any book recommendations that you would like to pass along to anyone watching or listening?
Well, I have to admit that I don't read too many, fiction type books. I'm a little nerdy in that sense. I'm usually reading scientific books or, books about running or triathlon or cookbooks or, those kinds of things. So I would say for people out there that are, looking to get into a healthy mindset, if they're looking for a really good cookbook, I would recommend Run Fast, Eat Slow. Kind of goes back to, kind of ties in with the whole cancer thing and, not eating a lot of processed foods and, getting back to the way my grandparents used to eat. They ate all the fresh foods and, all those kinds of things. So that
butter instead of margarine, nothing. I agree with that.
All that kind of stuff. It's a great book. It's actually by an Olympic marathoner. So so that's a great cookbook. Book wise, I've actually read all of Michael Pollan's books, so I would recommend any of his books in that same regard. So you can tell I'm a little nerdy. I read all that kind of stuff.
I've read a couple of his books. He has a 4-part Netflix series. Have you seen that?
Yes.
It's so good. I love Michael Pollan.
But I will say that because of my job, sometimes when I do need to just kind of check out, and I do go to the library and pick out a fiction book, I have to admit that I always pick out a chick lit kind of book. So, a shopaholic, the Tales of the Shopaholic and all those kinds of things.
Okay, we can put that down. That counts. And I imagine too, when you're going through chemo and radiation, from what my mom said, there was a lot of sitting around and waiting.
Oh yeah, I took my laptop to chemo with me. I'm in the process of putting the finishing details on the book that I've been writing since the day I was diagnosed. Wow. And I actually wrote from my chemo chair, and I wrote several of the chapters from my chemo chair of the experience that I was having and what was happening in the hospital at the time, and I described the stereotactic biopsy and all of those things. So, again, it all ties into the cross your finish lines. It's, to be an inspirational book of, here's what I went through, but also here's what my life gained from going through it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's another reason for everyone to follow poweredbybling.com and all of your social media handles, so we know when we can check out this book, because it sounds fantastic.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking to you. Every interview I have, I feel so inspired, and I feel like we had a lot to connect on, that we have in common, and I'm really excited to see what's to come for you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me, Mandy. And I'm excited to connect with both you and your mother on this level. It's the level that, your mom has another sister that she didn't have before. But thank you all for everything that you do on behalf of breast cancer and breast cancer survivors in the fight. So, and congratulations to your mom on her journey.
Yes, I'll have to tell her about her cancerversary so she can call it the
Congratulations, Mom.
All right. I hope my sniffling wasn't too loud on camera. Obviously, this was an emotional interview for both of us, and I don't know, I guess it's okay to cry. Anyway, I don't know about you, but I am super inspired by her story and motivated to really take life by the balls, because there's no excuse not to, I guess, for me. And she had so many motivating words, and her spirit is so strong and compassionate. I absolutely loved chatting with her and hope that you loved our conversation as much as I loved having it. All right, as usual, there is a giveaway, and you can check out her Forensic Files episode and see photos of the different things that we chatted about together in the show notes, which are at www.mandiem.com/episode and then 51, since this is episode 51. Also, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you share this with any friends, especially, you know what, ladies, because most breast cancer survivors and people impacted by the disease personally are actually female. So maybe this will encourage people to take the steps that they need to take in order to stay on top of their health and make sure that they don't end up in a situation that Cassandra could have been if her people in her corner hadn't been so diligent. So fill yourselves up. If you have a lady friend, gentlemen, if you're in a relationship, get their consent and then feel them up. Make it a fun activity every month to make sure that you are checking for lumps. But in both of these stories, these lumps would not have been felt. So if you have history in your family, or you have, passed the age of 40, definitely go and get your yearly checkups and your mammograms. As I said, they are not as unpleasant as their reputation makes it seem like they are. So do your due diligence and make sure you stay on top of your health, because screening and prevention can definitely be life-saving. Okay, PSA over. Feel up your boobies. And as always, be bold. Oh yeah, subscribe, leave me ratings. I have a whole bunch now because I followed Maddie Osmond's Fearless Fridays challenge, and I sent emails asking my former guests to leave me ratings, and it worked fantastically. But the more the better, because then iTunes will know that this is a valuable podcast and it'll suggest it to people. So if you have the chance, please go ahead and do that. Subscribe, leave me ratings, share it with friends, be bold, have a sparkly day. We'll see you on Friday with Cassandra's Challenge, and goodbye.